Okay, what we'll do is read, we're going to be in John 6:20. Hope that's right. That's where I am. And I'll read the whole thing, but we'll probably be in this section. We'll read all the way to 650. And we'll probably be in this section for a couple weeks. That's what I think. So I'll read it, and then you guys take your time and just soak it up. And remember also, this is just on the tail end of Jesus feeding 5,000 people with bread that he magically made multiply. I think that's super important when you hear what they say to him. It's just amazing. Therefore they said to him, "What sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate the manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." Then Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." Then they said to him, "Lord, give us this bread always." And Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day." The Jews then complained about him because he said, "I am the bread which came down from heaven." And they said, "Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Therefore Jesus answered and said to them, "Do not murmur among yourselves. No one has come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Therefore everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father, except he who is from God. He has seen the Father. Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me has everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, which one may eat of and not die." Okay, I want to just say a little bit. First of all, let me pause this. Okay, so here's the first thing I want to say. He had just fed 5,000 people with bread. Then he says, "I am the bread of life." And they say, "What sign will you give us so we can believe?" I mean, he just fed 5,000 people with bread that he made out of nowhere. And they're saying, what sign will you give us that you're the bread of life? I mean, that's freaking fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it couldn't be more direct already. It's amazing. That's amazing. But I think, until you get grounded in faith, I think it's just what happens to people. People can have pretty profound experiences, and by the next week, it's not enough. If they don't have faith, they could be wrecking out the next week. It's amazing. And I bet you there's an example in this room right now that's wrecking after a week after having something neat happen. Because that's the nature of signs. It's why Jesus was kind of annoyed when people wanted signs all the time. Because he knows for sure no matter what magic trick he does, no matter what he does, for you even, with your mind and heart, if you don't come to deep faith, he knows a week later you're going to be in despair. And that's what these guys are doing, and it's fantastic. I mean, it couldn't be more direct even. I mean, if it hadn't come after the feeding of the 5,000 even, you could say, oh, well, but he just made bread out of nothing and then said, I'm the bread of life. And they're saying, what sign will you show us? It's so funny. I mean, it's amazing. How do you do that? But that's what we do until we're grounded in faith. That's the thing. Until we're grounded in faith, that's what we do. And I'm going to brush up on my John of the Cross, because I haven't delved in that for a while. But if you remember his schema, the way he says to come into union with God, he says that faith is the only direct means of coming to union with God. The only direct means is faith. All other things, all other experiences are not direct. It is faith that is the direct way. And even though we know love is higher than faith, yet Jesus speaks of faith endlessly more than love. So remember this thing about last week, the lesson last week about can you just rest quietly and know that you have Christ? Can you just do that? And don't worry about whether or not you have some powerful manifestations. Father Patrick said if Jesus Christ physically walked in the room and John of the Cross was in prayer, he wouldn't have looked up. Because nothing could have been added to him he didn't already have in his faith. Think of this. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't add anything. You already have it. And at a certain place, a vision cannot add to it. It's really important we get this because I feel like very strongly it's now consistent. It's not a whim. It's what the Holy Spirit is telling me to do with the community is free you. To free you, you have to know you have it. You have to know you have it. There's an old kung fu movie, The Last Dragon. It's really, really cheesy. It didn't hold up well. I tried to watch it with my daughter. It was pretty bad. But I loved it as a kid so much. And this guy's a kung fu student, and his master says when he gets to the end of his training, there'll be this glow that comes over him. And he's waiting for the glow, and one day his teacher says, okay, we're done. I've given you everything I have. And he says, what about the glow, master? Where's the glow? And he says, you have everything. You already have it. He says, but I don't have the glow. Give me something to do. He wants something more to do. So he sends him on an impossible quest with no way to resolve it. Because he still thinks he's got to do more to get it. And on that quest, a bunch of stuff happens, but he's getting beat up by this guy, and he's getting dunked in the water, and the guy's saying, who's the master? Who's the master? Dunking him back in, and Underwater, he finally realizes, I am. The glow comes over him. So I'm not saying you're a master. I'm saying you have Christ. When do you get to just know that and no longer waver with that? When do you put away selfish fears and self-centeredness and all the concerns that make you think you can't have it? Can you just put it away and let Jesus be bigger than your issues? Right? Because it isn't a glow, it's a person. Since when do you have the power to kick that person out of your life? Since when are you all powerful that you can chase away the one who's pursuing you? The one who pursued you before you knew you were coming to Christ. Since when all of a sudden do you have the power to get that out of your life? It's not right to think that way. It's so wrong. And it's profoundly self-centered. It's profoundly self-centered. To think that you have the power through your arrogance or your greed or your lust or your whatever sins you're still trapped in, to think that you have the power to cast out the pursuer, the one who pursues you, the one who says, I will not let you be lost. I will not lose you. You can't cast me out. I came to you. Remember when he says, you didn't come to me, I came to you. You didn't love me, I loved you. It's first God pursues us. Then we get going and we think we did it. It's the party they throw in heaven when you get that you're going to God finally. And they're like, oh, whoa, man, I mean, that took like 5 freaking years to get them to hear that. Then we think, oh, and the littlest thing we could do is we could blow it now with some petty sin. How wrong-headed that is. If you're a villain, be the villain God saves. Just be the villain God saves. Just be the one, Moses murdered people. None of you probably have done that. I might know if you had. No one said, I murdered someone. Moses did. How are you out? How? There's room for humility, of course. I mean, I'm not walking around proud of myself, but come on, you're in. And you're not in because you say so. You're in because he says so. That's the thing. It would be different if it was just a force you had to learn to master. But we find that force is a person. We find that force is a person that's pursuing you. That's different. That is different. It's not the same thing. So then, if you're just unworthy, then be the one who's unworthy and get saved. If you're unworthy, then be the one who finds the humility of being unworthy. Every time I'm telling someone about humility, I tell them we become humble not because we're advanced. We just get honest. Humility isn't, it's not like I'm being charitable, I'm so great, but I'll be humble. That's not even it. Humility is warranted. So if you're unworthy, then be humble. Then you found the way in. It's okay. And if you're pigheaded and slow, come on, man. I mean, look, what do? You can throw fits all you want about it. But if you're slow, then be one of the slow ones who gets in. It's okay. So what? Jesus gives us all these things to reverse everything anyway, Many of the first will be last and the last first. So then you can think, well, I'm last. Maybe I'll be first. You never know. There's hope. You never know how it all plays out at the end. We don't know how it's going to go. You know? You just never know for sure. The Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, the lion, no bravery, then his whole thing is bravery. You think you don't have what you need, it's probably everything you're growing in. You think you don't have what it takes, it's probably the thing that's going to be the strongest thing about you when you're shining in the body of Christ. It's not what we think. We've got it all reversed and upside down. That's the thing. So much so. So they want another sign. I'm sure he's like, whoa. Oh my gosh. Like, and you're asking for a sign about bread, and and then they're talking about the Jewish peoples, and they got that manna that would form on the ground and they'd eat it, and they're like saying, if you'd give us that bread, we'd be okay. But like, read the story. All they did is whine about it. They're like, oh yeah, we're fed, but it's so boring. I mean, they weren't even happy with their signs they were getting every day. So give us that sign. It's like he's thinking, are you reading this? You guys, come on. And that's really, truly how we are until we get faith. The people that have faith do this way less. But the people without faith are always worrying about it. It's so funny. And some of them have visions. And it's like God comes and, I mean, I'm not going to give anything away because people in here have had things, but God comes and talks to you or wraps you up or whatever, some profound thing. And a week later, you can be in despair if you don't have faith. It just doesn't hold. I know, I've had tons of visions. That stuff does not hold. Occasionally, if I'm in confusion, one of those experiences will come in and remind me of something they've told me to fix confusion. But it can't fix a lack of faith. It can't make me feel secure. Security comes from faith. Faith alone. And that stability is, you can't build, a building on sand. Without that solid foundation, you have nothing. And faith is free. It comes from Jesus, and it needs no evidence, but it provides lots. It provides this kind of evidence. You used to spin out, and you're not now. And you think, I don't have anything really fancy going on, but whoa, do I notice some stability here? Don't I notice some strength here? There's gifts in it. There's gifts in it. And they're ordinary in some ways. Something personal that's happening to me. It might see, you might get it because you guys know me so well. I don't know what's happening, but I love my dad so much lately. I can't believe how much I love my dad, and we didn't have a great relationship, and lots of trouble, I think, and I've wept. And I've just told him in heaven, I'm so sorry for everything. And I think, God, I might be dead in like 20. I don't want to go up there still complaining, man, and have to face him. I want to be past that, man. So I'm like, dudes, I'm sorry, you guys. Like, I know. And I'm not saying nothing happened. I'm not saying I was all wrong. I'm just saying I'm sorry I didn't quit yapping about it. And carrying it around. I didn't know I was, and I'm so sorry. And then these gifts have been, I don't know, it's ordinary stuff, but I feel my dad. I feel my dad and all of his strength and all of he had a lot of stuff that was good in there, a lot, and I didn't get any of it because I was rejecting him. I'm inheriting some things. And that all comes from faith and the stability of faith. The stability of faith. Just to be so okay, it's okay, things aren't okay, I guess. It's beautiful. And then the commandment, honor your father and mother, comes in like, okay. I have been, and I've always been willing to forgive. That's, in case you're wondering, the monk told me, it's okay if you have a problem with your parents. It is okay. The only thing you have to know for sure is, are you willing to forgive? Don't even have to have forgiven yet. Only are you willing. He said, if you are, you're right with God on that. Okay. I think I said what I wanted to say about the faith thing. And then there's only one more piece I want to say, but if you would share your experience for a minute, I'll pause. Okay, go ahead and do it.
Yes, sir.
I don't have much to say about the experience itself because we talked and he already had his head in the right place with it. I said, what do you think it means? I was setting him up. Like, look, how much has this dude done with it? And he said, not much. He didn't want to put a lot on it, he said. And I said, great, that's what we do, because as soon as you put a bunch of stuff on it, you've made a lot of things up, which is what someone in the room might be doing. Like, well, that didn't happen to me. What's wrong with me? And now you're making stuff up, and everyone's making stuff up. It's so funny. But the only thing I wanted to use as a teaching moment with it, just one thing. It may have nothing, very little to do with what happened to him really, but I put it in the category of experiences that helps people see why the path can take a while to unfold. Because God came and he quite quickly said, please be mellow. And it's what happens. It happens to a number of people. It doesn't happen to everyone, but I think the community should hear it. If you remember, it happened to Court, where he was outside and he said, why won't you just come to me? He had started saying things like, why is God taking so long? And so he's sleeping outside in his yard and a black hole appears in his lawn. And he realizes if he lets himself get sucked down in that, he'll go straight to God. And he's terrified and won't go. And he begs it to stop. And then it closes. And then he says, oh, wait. Okay, I'll go this time. You guys, if you remember this, it happened 3 times. And each time it opened again, he said, no, I can't go. I won't go. But he knew if he went, he'd go straight to God. But he also could not get himself to go. So Ryan and I were talking, and it's like, ultimately, it's not true that the path takes a long time. That isn't true. It is true, but it's not because of God. It's squarely on our shoulders, and that's okay, It's not about guilt, but it's good to know where the problem is. You can address it. Right? We have to know where the problem lies. And it's with us. So, okay. That's one part. And the other thing I wanted to say is, this is pretty cosmic stuff here, Jesus is saying. This is when they start wanting to kill him. They're pissed now. Because he's talking about being, the bread that came down from heaven. And no one has seen God except the one who came down from heaven. He has seen God. They know he's talking about himself. And I wanted to mention too, these people didn't believe in reincarnation, and they didn't believe in a pre-existence. So they couldn't have confused his words when he says, I came down from heaven. They didn't put themselves in a category that could relate to that in any way, whether by way of pre-existence or whether by way of reincarnation. There was no category for them to think, well, I kind of came down from heaven too. Because they didn't think that way about themselves at all. They were created at the moment of conception. That's when they were brought into being. They didn't exist before that. They were created at the moment of conception. That's when that soul was made by God. So there was no sense in which they could say, me too. So it was very clear what Jesus was saying. Right? And, okay, so the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And I want to talk about two senses in which you can hear that. The first is the one we always talk about, which is God, the infinite God, became a human being to bring life to the world through salvation, through Christ. That's one sense. That's one sense in which you can hear this. But there's another sense too, which is much more cosmic, which is Jesus is the Logos. So the way the Trinity is, I'm going to speak very basic. You can caveat every single thing I'm going to say with all these other things. It can get pretty crazy. If you've read the Russian book on the Trinity, you're like, whoa, we just did like 4 pages saying, but not that, but not that, but not that. And you think, my gosh, it's pretty rich, it's pretty thick, and you can't follow it very well. But so I want to speak simply, but the Father is pure being. That's just pure existence. Pure, it's existence itself. It's not anyone's particular existence yet, because no one's been made yet. It's just the fact of existence itself, that there is existence. You exist because existence exists in God. You couldn't exist otherwise. That's where it comes from. But the Logos is the information. It's the order. It's the data. If someone dies and has a near-death experience or takes psychedelics or maybe has a really profound meditation, sometimes people will report seeing these geometrical patterns will start to show themselves. And in, more esoteric religions like Buddhism or Hinduism, they'll say, yeah, what you're getting to when you see that are the principal patterns through which all of creation is created. Does that make sense? So let's say there's information, and the Logos is information. It's the word. Well, what are words? Well, words are codes for information. So the Logos is the information that made the universe. Right? Like that's, so there's pure being, and then being wants to create, and it creates through the Logos, which is itself the second person of the Trinity. So that's what Jesus is. So all of the universe is Christ in that sense. And if someone like took LSD or like they died and had a near-death experience and they got to the level of all the geometric patterns, and then they come back and say, I didn't see Jesus. And then Christians with no faith go, oh man, they didn't see Jesus. Maybe Jesus isn't really there. Now, come on now. Really? They saw all this data. Jesus is the Logos. They didn't see Jesus. They were never not in Jesus. They never weren't in it. Just like right now, you're never not in it. You see what I'm saying? What do you mean they didn't see Jesus? Of course they saw Jesus. But they saw Jesus in the same sense as if they took a chunk of his skin and looked at it under a microscope and looked at his cells and said, I didn't see Jesus. I just saw these cells, or I just saw these little DNA helixes. I didn't see Jesus. Of course not. It's a problem of scale. Yeah, you didn't see Jesus. It's pan out about 100,000 light years, and there's Jesus in the whole thing. Where is he not? If a Christian takes psychedelics, would they have a different experience? No, probably not. But everything they saw would be part of Christ. Then they'd recognize that. So when Jesus says, I am the bread which came down from heaven and gives life to the world, he's literally talking about his role in the Trinity in creating creation and holding it together. It's the same as when a physicist says, I've looked into the universe and we don't find God. We find the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force and gravity and et cetera. We see all this. We don't We don't see God. And you say, really? All of that order? All of that information and all of that data? And you haven't seen the logos? What are you talking about? You've never stopped talking about the logos this whole time. That's all there is. So it's really cosmic. It's really, really, Jesus, it's like the human Jesus, right? The physical Jesus got a body. Don't forget who's in there. Don't forget that's a door to something. That's a gate to something. But what it's a door to and what it's a gate to is a vast cosmic reality. And that marks my exit from the New Age movement, not picking on the New Age in any way. There's so many different beliefs in it anyway. Just my own particular experience with it. I'm playing with these energies, saying I've never seen Jesus. I didn't really say that, but I could have been. I've never seen Jesus. And then a problem of scale, perspective changes, and I'm like messing with his eyes. And I think I'm playing with energies, but I'm playing with someone. That's what happened to me. And it was shocking and absurd and scary. I realized I was playing with someone, not something. But it took some time to get that scale and see, oh, I'm manipulating a person, not an energy. There's a person there, not just an energy. So, okay. That's, I don't know, man. I might have said it all. Yeah, I might have said it all. Yeah, so it starts with pure being. And pure being is aware of itself and knows itself. That's the logos. And pure being and awareness, love. And that's the third person of the Holy Trinity. It's the Holy Spirit. So Jesus comes down from the Father, down from heaven to give life to the world. That's an act of the Trinity. That's an act of the Trinity. That's the way in which it was created. And it's pretty powerful and pretty cosmic and pretty big, and you're part of all that. This is why the Russian Orthodox Church insists on this cosmic dimension of Christ consciousness. It's the part the New Age loves about Jesus, the Christ consciousness part. They love it. Because it's that part where you get to like be in the whole universe. And you only have to think about it to do that. You just think about, you're participating in Christ. Christ is in you. You're in Christ. Where are you? Then you're in everything. You're everywhere. There's nowhere you're not. There's nowhere you are not. If you're in Christ. And I dated this woman right before I met Mary. It's a chemical engineer woman, a mystic. And I don't know what I think of this, but we were kissing. And she said, without ego, I think, for the most part, she said, to be with me is to be with all women because I am everywhere. And she could tell me what time of day I did Tai Chi. She could tell me what time of day I did Tai Chi while we were dating. She could just feel when I was doing Tai Chi, and she was right. Someone who had a bit of that cosmic connection, participating in that. So all the way from the Trinity to the uncreated energies shining out the life given to the world. The angelic beings who help mediate them. Right? All the way down to us creatures that are made in its image. All connected and all one. And like, we're totally physical beings, and Trinity is non-physical, not physical, pure energetic. And we share this relationship. The Trinity mutually loves and gives. And then when we stop sinning, we love and we give freely. Jesus says, I can do nothing but what I see the Father do. We'll do nothing but what we see the Trinity do. When our stability is such that we can forget ourselves, then we can love the other with abandon, with total abandon, because there's no insecurity, nothing to protect, nothing to hide. It's all healed up. So pure, infinite pouring out of love and appreciation by beings fully grounded in themselves enough to forget themselves in safety. To forget themselves utterly because they're so fully themselves. Which is what the Trinity is already doing, and which is what we're invited to do with them. So what we do is what they're doing. What we do is what they're doing. This is off. I don't know if it's part of it, but Christian mysticism seems to be an embodied enlightenment. It is cosmic. What Ryan was doing was leaving his body a little. He probably did roll over, but his body didn't go with him. I've done that enough to, like, I fell off of a massage table once. And I get up and there's my body. I'm like, oh, what? Like, that's weird. So he probably did turn around, you know. He was in that. It was just enough in that to have his body and soul separate a little bit. And it's a precursor to all kinds of stuff that happens to people sometimes. And that's all great. But Christianity is an embodied enlightenment. It's never an enlightenment that rejects or transcends the body. It incorporates and transcends. The body is not an accident of our existence. It is an integral part of it. Our souls weren't designed to be bodiless. It's embodied. And there's a character to Christian enlightenment that can get super cosmic and stay really grounded because of that. Which is why we say there is right and wrong instead of right and wrong is a social construct. It's a social construct if none of this is real and it's all relative. But if physical reality is physical reality and God made it and it's good, not an accident, then there are laws that govern physical reality and the beings who incarnate in physical reality. Then that means then that there are principles that are true and there's false and there's right and there's wrong. Don't ask me what it always is. I know there is, but I'm not always clear on what's right and wrong. That's above my pay grade, but there is right and wrong, and a guy like me is expected to try to figure that out in every given circumstance. Even though I don't always know for sure. It's hard to say sometimes. Was I right or wrong? I don't know for sure. A little bit of both, usually. But it's an embodied enlightenment. It's an embodied enlightenment. Which is why Jesus did not require a person to have cosmic experiences in order to become enlightened. what's required is love, which sits right in the middle of the cosmic and the physical. It's love that is the measure of our enlightenment, and only love. Mystic or non-mystic doesn't matter. It is love. And that love begins with the kind of security that can abandon oneself and care about the other more than itself. And we know what that looks like when it's unhealthy. That's codependence. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about something else. A security, a level of healing that can forget itself because it's not going to lose itself.